Chapter 1. The City Lights Lied. The city lights, a symphony of gold and ruby, painted streaks across the vast canvas of the night sky. Normally, the sight would have soothed Sarah, filling her with a sense of awe and wonder. Tonight, however, the glittering panorama only served to emphasize the emptiness that gnawed at her soul. The silence in their apartment was a suffocating presence, a tangible weight pressing down on her chest. The air crackled with the residue of their latest argument, a storm of unspoken resentments and bitter accusations that had left both of them emotionally drained. Unpacked boxes, like sentinels of a life in transition, loomed in the corners of the room, a constant reminder of the fragile state of their relationship. Ben sat hunched over his laptop at the kitchen counter, the blue light from the screen painting his face in an eerie glow. His fingers danced across the keyboard, his brow furrowed in concentration, a familiar mask that shielded him from the emotional wreckage scattered around them. It had become their unspoken ritual, this retreat into the digital world, a way to avoid the messy, uncomfortable truths that simmered just beneath the surface. Work, deadlines, the constant demands of his career, these had become Ben's refuge, his shield against the complexities of their relationship. Sarah, perched on the edge of the sofa, her legs tucked beneath her, watched him with a mixture of longing and resentment. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the chasm that had grown between them, but the weight of their unspoken words, the sting of his dismissive tone, held her back. "Ben," she finally spoke, her voice a hesitant whisper, barely audible above the gentle hum of the refrigerator. He didn't look up, his fingers still flying across the keyboard, the only acknowledgement a grunt that could have been agreement or annoyance. "We need to talk." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. He sighed, the sound a mixture of exasperation and exhaustion, a familiar sound that grated on Sarah's nerves. It was the sigh of a man who felt burdened, put upon, a man who saw her needs as an inconvenience, an unwelcome intrusion into his carefully constructed world. "Can it wait, Sarah?" he mumbled, his gaze still fixed on the glowing screen. "I have a deadline tomorrow." The familiar excuse, a well-worn shield that deflected her attempts at connection. It was always work, always a deadline, always something more important than her. The resentment, simmering beneath the surface for months, threatened to boil over. "A good life." Sarah's voice, though quiet, held a steely edge that surprised even her. "Is that what you call this? A life where I feel constantly ignored, like my feelings are an inconvenience?" He finally looked up, his expression a mixture of annoyance and weariness. "Don't start this again, Sarah. I'm tired." Tired? The word echoed in her mind, a mocking reminder of her own exhaustion, the emotional labor of trying to reach a man who had built walls so high, so thick, that even her love couldn't penetrate them. "Tired? You're tired? What about how I feel, Ben? Don't I deserve to be heard?" The words tumbled out, fueled by months of suppressed frustration, years of feeling invisible, unimportant. He pushed back from the counter, his movements stiff, his jaw clenched. "Look, I just need some space right now, okay?" The familiar dismissal, the retreat into emotional isolation, the one-sided conversation that had become the hallmark of their relationship. Sarah stood up, the anger that had been simmering now a raging inferno. "Space," she spat, the word laced with venom. "That's all you ever want, isn't it? Space from me, space from us, space from anything that requires you to actually feel something." She turned and stormed out of the apartment, the slam of the door echoing in the silence, a final punctuation mark to a chapter that was long overdue for closure. The city lights, once a symbol of hope and promise, now felt cold and distant, a reflection of the emptiness that had settled in her heart. As she walked, the cool night air a welcome balm on her flushed skin, Sarah knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that something had to change. She couldn't keep living like this, a ghost in her own life, a shadow flitting through the edges of Ben's carefully constructed world. She deserved more, she craved more, and she was finally ready to fight for it. Chapter 2. Seeking Solace. The city streets, a labyrinth of concrete and glass, pulsed with a frenetic energy that mirrored the turmoil swirling within Sarah. The cool night air, thick with the scent of exhaust fumes and distant rain, did little to soothe the burning anger that coursed through her veins. Each step away from the apartment, each block traversed, felt like a physical manifestation of her emotional separation from Ben. With every stride, the weight of their unspoken resentments, the years spent trying to reach a man who had retreated into the fortress of his own making, seemed to lessen. She walked for what felt like hours, her thoughts a tangled mess of hurt, anger, and a deep, aching loneliness. The familiar sights of their neighborhood, the cozy Italian restaurant where they celebrated their first anniversary, the park bench where they shared stolen kisses under the summer sky, the corner bookstore where she spent countless hours browsing the shelves, now seemed like taunts, mocking reminders of a love that was slowly dying. Exhaustion finally overtook her, the adrenaline that had fueled her flight fading, leaving her feeling drained and empty. She found herself standing in front of a small, brightly lit cafe, the warm glow emanating from the windows beckoning her like a beacon in the darkness. Sarah hesitated for a moment, unsure if she wanted company, but the thought of returning to the empty apartment, to the suffocating silence that had become their constant companion, was unbearable. She pushed open the door, the sound of laughter and conversation washing over her, a welcome contrast to the oppressive quiet of her own thoughts. The cafe was small and cozy, the air thick with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and cinnamon pastries. A mismatched collection of tables and chairs filled the space, creating an intimate atmosphere that felt both inviting and safe. Sarah chose a table near the window, away from the other patrons, seeking a temporary haven from the storm raging within her. As she settled into the worn wooden chair, a young woman with bright eyes and a warm smile approached her table. "Hi there, welcome in," the woman said, her voice as cheerful as the sunflowers tucked behind her ear. "Can I get you something to drink?" Sarah glanced at the menu, but nothing appealed to her. The words blurred before her eyes, the familiar offerings holding no comfort. "Just water, please," she mumbled, her voice hoarse from the unched tears that threatened to spill over. The woman nodded, her smile unwavering. "Coming right up." As the woman turned away, Sarah's gaze drifted to a small stage tucked in the back corner of the cafe. A microphone stood sentinel, waiting for its voice, a guitar leaning against a nearby stool. A sign above the stage announced Open McNight, a weekly event that seemed to draw a diverse crowd of aspiring musicians and poetry enthusiasts. Sarah had never been one for open mics, preferring the quiet solace of her own company. Tonight, however, something about the prospect of losing herself in the stories of others, in the shared vulnerability of creative expression, held a strange appeal. Perhaps, she thought, hearing other people's tales of heartbreak and hope would help her make sense of the tangled mess of her own emotions. Maybe, just maybe, someone else's words would provide the clarity she so desperately craved. The woman returned with her water, a silent offering of kindness that Sarah accepted with a grateful nod. The cool water soothed her parched throat, a small comfort in the midst of the emotional desert that had become her life. As Sarah sipped her water, her gaze drifted back to the stage. A young man, his face barely visible in the dim lighting, took the stage, his guitar slung low across his chest. He tuned the instrument, his fingers moving with a practiced ease that hinted at years of dedication to his craft. When he finally spoke, his voice, husky and resonant, filled the small space, a sound that commanded attention. "This one's called The City Lights Lied," he announced, a wry smile playing on his lips. "It's about the promises we make to ourselves, the dreams we chase, and the harsh realities that sometimes blindside us. The first chords resonated through the cafe, a haunting melody that seemed to echo the turmoil in Sarah's soul. The lyrics, raw and honest, spoke of lost love, broken promises, and the struggle to find your way in a world that often felt cold and unforgiving. As the man sang, his voice weaving a tapestry of pain and longing, Sarah felt a lump forming in her throat, tears stinging her eyes. It was as if he were singing her story, giving voice to the emotions she had been struggling to articulate. The man finished his song, the final chords hanging in the air, a lingering echo of the raw emotion he had poured into his performance. The cafe erupted in applause, but Sarah remained silent, her emotions too raw, too close to the surface to be contained by polite clapping. She sat there, her heart pounding, her breath catching in her throat, as the man stepped off the stage, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and Sarah felt a jolt of recognition, a sense of kinship with this stranger who had poured his soul into his music. As the man disappeared into the crowd, Sarah knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this was not a coincidence. This was a sign, a message from the universe, a reminder that she was not alone in her pain, that even in the darkest of nights, there was always a glimmer of hope, a flicker of light waiting to guide her way. She finished her water, leaving a generous tip on the table, a small gesture of gratitude for the unexpected solace she had found in this unlikely haven. As she stepped back out into the night, the city lights no longer seemed cold and distant. They twinkled with a newfound warmth, a promise of possibility, a reminder that even in the aftermath of heartbreak, life went on. And with each sunrise, a chance for a new beginning emerged. Chapter 3: A Shift in the Tides. The weeks that followed Sarah's emotional outburst were a study in contrasts. The silence that had once hung heavy in their apartment, a suffocating blanket of unspoken resentments, was replaced by a fragile, almost tentative peace. They moved through their shared space like dancers in a delicate ballet, careful not to step on each other's toes, their every interaction tinged with a cautious awareness of the chasm that had opened up between them. Ben, jolted by the raw intensity of Sarah's pain, seemed to make a concerted effort to bridge the distance. He was more attentive, more present. He listened, really listened, when she spoke, his gaze holding hers with an intensity she hadn't seen in years. He put down his phone when she entered the room, a small gesture that spoke volumes about his newfound willingness to prioritize her. He surprised her with small acts of kindness, her favorite takeout delivered after a long day at work, a bouquet of sunflowers brightening their kitchen table, a handwritten note tucked into her purse, its simple message, "Thinking of you," a balm to her wounded heart. Sarah, wary but hopeful, responded in kind. She forced herself to soften the sharp edges of her resentment, to meet his tentative gestures with a cautious openness. She shared details about her day, her work, the small triumphs and frustrations that made up the fabric of her life. She laughed at his jokes, even the corny ones, and allowed her hand to linger in his a beat longer than necessary when they passed in the hallway. But despite their efforts, a sense of unease lingered, a shadow lurking beneath the surface of their newfound truce. The trust that had been the bedrock of their love, the foundation upon which they had built their shared life, had been irrevocably shaken. Sarah found herself questioning every word, every gesture, searching for hidden meanings, for signs that he was slipping back into old patterns. The fear of being hurt again, of her heart being trampled under the weight of his emotional neglect, was a constant companion, a whisper in the back of her mind that threatened to derail their fragile progress. Ben, too, seemed to struggle with the weight of their history. His newfound attentiveness was often overshadowed by a brooding silence, a sense of unease that permeated their interactions. He would start to speak, then stop, his words catching in his throat as if he were wrestling with invisible demons. One evening, as they sat across from each other at their kitchen table, the remnants of a hastily prepared meal between them, the silence stretched out, a taut rope stretched to its breaking point. Ben cleared his throat, his gaze darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. "Sarah," he began, his voice hesitant, "about the other night." Sarah met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "What about it?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, the gesture conveying a frustration that mirrored her own. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Again. Sorry." The word felt hollow, inadequate to encompass the depth of hurt she had endured. "Is that all you have to say? Sorry." He flinched as if she had struck him, his eyes filling with a pain that surprised her. "What do you want me to say, Sarah? What do you want me to do?" She stared at him, the anger that had been simmering now a full-blown inferno. "I want you to see me, Ben. I want you to understand what this is doing to me." His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him, leaving behind a weary resignation. "I am trying, Sarah. I'm trying to be better, to be the man you need me to be, but I don't know how." His admission, spoken with a vulnerability she had rarely witnessed, momentarily disarmed her. For a fleeting moment, she saw a glimmer of the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had promised her the world, the man who had slowly but surely retreated into the fortress of his own making, leaving her stranded outside, pounding on the gates, her voice lost in the wind. "I need some time, Ben," she said, her voice softer now, the anger receding, replaced by a weariness that went down to her bones. "Time?" He looked up, his eyes pleading. "Time for what?" "Time to think, to figure things out. Time to breathe." He nodded, his face pale, the rejection etched into every line. "I understand." He stood up, his movement stiff, his gaze avoiding hers. I'll give you space." He turned and walked out of the kitchen, the weight of their unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Sarah sat there, alone at the table, the silence that had once been a source of comfort now a gaping wound, a reminder of the distance that had grown between them, a distance that threatened to swallow them both whole. Chapter 4. Emily. The space Sarah craved, the time she needed to untangle the knotted mess of her emotions, arrived in the most unexpected form, a vibrant whirlwind named Emily. They met at a volunteer event for Sarah's favorite animal shelter, a world away from the sterile confines of her apartment and the stifling weight of her relationship with Ben. Emily, with her infectious laughter and genuine warmth, was a breath of fresh air, a burst of color in the muted palette of Sarah's world. She had a way of making everyone around her feel seen, heard, and valued, a quality Sarah had yearned for in the barren landscape of her relationship with Ben. Sarah, drawn to Emily's energy like a moth to a flame, found herself opening up, sharing snippets of her life, the frustrations of her work, the gnawing loneliness that had become a constant companion. Emily, in turn, listened with a patience that disarmed Sarah, her eyes reflecting a genuine empathy that Sarah hadn't encountered in years. They started spending more time together, exploring the city's hidden gems, cozy cafes tucked away on cobblestone streets, vibrant farmers' markets overflowing with fresh produce, and art galleries showcasing the works of local artists, their conversations punctuated by bursts of laughter and shared moments of quiet contemplation. Emily introduced Sarah to yoga, a practice that Sarah, initially skeptical, found surprisingly grounding. As she flowed through the poses, guided by Emily's gentle instructions, Sarah felt the tension that had been coiled tight within her slowly unravel, replaced by a sense of calm and clarity she hadn't experienced in years. After class, as they sipped herbal tea in the studio's serene lounge, Emily shared her own story of heartbreak, a tale of betrayal and resilience that resonated deeply with Sarah. It was a reminder that she wasn't alone in her pain, that even the deepest wounds could heal, leaving behind scars that told a story of survival. As they parted ways, Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, a flicker of hope that had been dormant for far too long. It was the beginning of a shift, a subtle but undeniable pull towards a light she hadn't realized she was seeking. Their friendship blossomed, fueled by shared laughter, late-night conversations that stretched into the wee hours of the morning, and a growing sense of understanding that transcended words. Emily was everything Ben wasn't: open, expressive, and effortless, in tune with Sarah's emotional needs. She listened without judgment, offered advice without condescension, and made Sarah laugh until her sides ached, a feeling that had become a distant memory in the sterile environment of her relationship with Ben. They explored the city together, discovering hidden gardens tucked away between towering buildings, quirky vintage shops overflowing with forgotten treasures, and cozy bookstores where they could lose themselves in the worlds created by ink and paper. One rainy Saturday afternoon, as they were curled up on Sarah's couch, a stack of old movies piled high on the coffee table, sipping hot chocolate and sharing stories, a comfortable silence fell between them. The rain beat against the windows, a soothing rhythm that lulled Sarah into a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. Emily, her gaze fixed on the flickering images on the TV screen, spoke, her voice soft, tinged with concern. "You haven't mentioned Ben lately," she said, her words breaking the silence. "How are things with you two?" The question, though gentle, pierced through Sarah's carefully constructed facade, unleashing a torrent of emotions she had been trying to keep at bay. The casual outings with Emily, the laughter, the newfound sense of peace, it had all been a temporary reprieve, a fragile bubble shielding her from the harsh reality of her crumbling relationship. Sarah's carefully constructed wall of composure crumbled. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. She tried to speak, to force out a casual response, but the words caught in her throat, choked by the knot of unshed tears that had been building for months. Emily, sensing her distress, reached out, her hand gently resting on Sarah's arm. "Hey, it's okay," she murmured, her voice a soothing balm to Sarah's raw nerves. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." But Sarah did want to talk. The words, dammed up for so long, spilled out in a torrent of pain, frustration, and the crushing weight of loneliness. She told Emily about the endless nights spent waiting for Ben to come home, the unanswered texts, the empty promises, the slow erosion of their connection until all that remained was a hollow shell of the love they once shared. She spoke of her attempts to bridge the distance, her pleas for attention, for connection, for just a sliver of the man she had fallen in love with. She spoke of his dismissive responses, his retreat into the cold comfort of his work, the way he seemed to prioritize everything and everyone over her. And as she spoke, the tears flowed freely, washing away the layers of hurt and resentment she had been carrying for so long. Emily listened patiently, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm of Sarah's grief. She didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. She simply held Sarah's hand, her gaze unwavering, her silence speaking volumes about the depth of her empathy and understanding. As the tears subsided, a strange sense of calm settled over Sarah. It wasn't the numb detachment she had grown accustomed to, the emotional anesthesia she had used to survive the slow disintegration of her relationship with Ben. This was different. This was a peace that came from being truly seen, truly heard, truly understood. It was in the safety of Emily's embrace, amidst the gentle murmur of the rain and the comforting flicker of the TV screen, that Sarah realized she was not just mourning the loss of her relationship with Ben. She was grieving the loss of the person she had become in that relationship, a person she no longer recognized, a person she no longer wanted to be. And in that moment of clarity, a spark of determination ignited within her, a fierce resolve to reclaim her life, to rediscover the woman she had lost, and to embrace a future filled with joy, authenticity, and a love that nourished her soul. Chapter 5. Shifting Sands. The weeks following Sarah's tearful confession to Emily were a whirlwind of change. The delicate dance of avoidance she and Ben had been performing in their shared apartment came to an abrupt halt. Sarah, emboldened by the unwavering support and validation she received from Emily, found her voice. The silence that had once suffocated her, a heavy blanket woven from unspoken resentments and unmet needs, was shattered by the force of her newfound clarity. She spoke her truth, her words like shards of glass piercing through the carefully constructed facade of their relationship. The city lights that had once held the promise of a shared future now reflected the stark reality of their diverging paths. The cracks in their foundation, once hairline fractures easily ignored, now gaped wide, revealing the chasm that had grown between them. Ben, jolted by the intensity of Sarah's pain, her raw vulnerability laid bare, reacted with a mixture of confusion and a belated attempt at reconciliation. He fumbled with apologies, his words hollow echoes of promises long broken. He showered her with attention, a desperate attempt to reclaim the ground he had lost, to recapture the woman who had once craved his validation. He bought her flowers, arranged romantic dinners, and showered her with compliments, his efforts as fleeting as the moments of connection they shared, quickly fading into the familiar pattern of emotional distance and neglect. But Sarah was no longer the woman who sought her worth in his fleeting moments of attention. The seed of self-love that Emily had planted, nurtured by genuine empathy and unwavering support, had taken root, blossoming into a fierce determination to break free from the cycle of pain and disappointment that had defined her relationship with Ben. Emily's presence in Sarah's life was a constant reminder of what a healthy, supportive relationship could look like. Their shared laughter, their deep conversations that stretched into the wee hours of the morning, their comfortable silences filled with unspoken understanding. It was a stark contrast to the emotional desert Sarah had been navigating with Ben. The space Emily had created, a sanctuary of acceptance and emotional safety, allowed Sarah to see their relationship with a clarity that had been obscured by years of longing and the desperate hope that Ben would finally change. She saw the patterns of neglect, the emotional distance, the constant push and pull that had become their dance of dysfunction. She saw the man Ben was, not the man she had hoped he could be, and she finally understood that she deserved more than the crumbs of affection he offered. One cool autumn evening, as the leaves outside their apartment window began to turn, painting the cityscape in hues of gold and crimson, Ben arrived home from work, his arms laden with grocery bags, a hopeful smile on his face. "I thought I'd make your favorite tonight," he said, his voice laced with a tentative cheerfulness that grated on Sarah's nerves. "Remember that pasta dish with the creamy pesto sauce? The one we used to have?" His voice trailed off, the memory of their shared past, once a source of comfort, now a painful reminder of what they had lost. Sarah stood by the window, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Ben," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "we need to talk." He set the grocery bags on the counter, his smile faltering. "Sure," he said, his voice hesitant. "What's up?" "This isn't working," she said, the words hanging in the air between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Ben's face paled, his eyes widening in disbelief. What do you mean?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "Us," she said, her gaze steady, her voice unwavering. "We're not working. I can't keep doing this anymore." "Doing what?" he asked, his voice rising, a hint of desperation creeping in. "Pretending," she said, turning to face him, her eyes mirroring the fading light outside. "Pretending that we're happy, pretending that we're okay, pretending that this empty shell of a relationship is enough for me. It's not." Ben opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Don't, Ben," she said, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering. "Don't try to fix this. Don't try to apologize. Don't make promises you can't keep. It's over." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and final, cutting through the years of denial and the lingering hope that had kept them both tethered to a relationship that had long since run its course. Ben stared at her, his face a mask of pain and defeat. He wanted to argue, to plead, to beg for another chance, but the words died in his throat. He saw in her eyes, for the first time, the unwavering strength of a woman who had finally found her own voice, a woman who was no longer willing to settle for a love that diminished her, a love that left her feeling empty and alone. He nodded, his shoulders slumping, the weight of his own failings pressing down on him. He turned and walked towards the door, his steps heavy, his head bowed. "Goodbye, Sarah," he whispered, his voice a broken echo of the man he once was. Sarah stood by the window, watching as he disappeared into the gathering darkness, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. It was a tear of sadness, of loss, of the bittersweet ache of letting go. But it was also a tear of liberation, of a newfound freedom, of a love that had finally set her free. As she stood there, bathed in the fading light, Sarah knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this was not an ending, but a beginning. A beginning of a journey of self-discovery, of healing, of embracing a love that honored her worth, a love that allowed her to shine, a love that was as bright and as boundless as the city lights that glittered outside her window. Chapter 6. A New Dawn. The air in Sarah's apartment, once thick with the lingering scent of Ben and their shared history, now carried the sweet aroma of cinnamon and vanilla. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, highlighting the vibrant colors of throw pillows scattered across the couch, a stark contrast to the muted tones that had previously dominated the space. The transformation extended beyond the physical space, a reflection of the seismic shift that had occurred within Sarah's heart. The breakup with Ben, a painful severing of ties that had bound her for so long, had been a necessary amputation, a removal of a toxic element that had been slowly poisoning her spirit. The weeks that followed had been a blur of tears, sleepless nights, and a soul-crushing emptiness that threatened to swallow her whole. But amidst the wreckage of her shattered dreams, a seed of hope had taken root, nurtured by Emily's unwavering love and support. Emily. Her name was a balm to Sarah's wounded heart, a whisper of promise in the deafening silence that had once filled her days. Emily, with her infectious laughter, her genuine warmth, and her uncanny ability to see into Sarah's soul, had become a lifeline, a beacon of light in the darkness that had threatened to consume her. They had started slowly, cautiously, their friendship a delicate dance around the edges of Sarah's grief. Emily, wise beyond her years, understood the need for space, the importance of allowing Sarah to process her pain at her own pace. She offered a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on, and a steady stream of witty banter that chipped away at the icy walls Sarah had erected around her heart. As the weeks turned into months, their bond deepened, evolving from a tentative friendship into a fierce loyalty, a shared understanding that transcended words. They moved in together, a natural progression that felt more like a homecoming than a leap of faith. Sarah's apartment, once a sterile reminder of her failed relationship with Ben, was transformed into a haven of shared dreams and laughter. They painted the walls in vibrant hues, reflecting the newfound vibrancy of their lives. They filled the space with plants, their lush greenery a symbol of growth and renewal. They cooked elaborate meals together, experimenting with exotic spices and flavors, the kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of shared creation. Sarah's work, once a source of frustration and unfulfilled potential, blossomed under the nurturing gaze of Emily's support. Emily, a gifted artist herself, had an uncanny ability to see the beauty in Sarah's designs, to encourage her to push boundaries, to embrace the unique spark of creativity that had been dimmed by years of self-doubt and Ben's dismissive criticism. With Emily's encouragement, Sarah launched her own online store, showcasing her designs to the world. The response was overwhelming. Orders poured in from all corners of the globe, each purchase a validation of Sarah's talent, a testament to the power of believing in oneself. Sarah's success, however, paled in comparison to the joy she found in Emily's love. Emily was her muse, her confidant, her lover, her best friend. She celebrated Sarah's triumphs as her own, offering unwavering support through challenges, and reminding Sarah of her strength and resilience when self-doubt threatened to creep in. One warm summer evening, as they sat on their balcony, sipping wine and watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, Emily turned to Sarah, her eyes sparkling with a love that made Sarah's heart ache. "You're amazing, you know that," Emily said, her voice soft, her gaze unwavering. "You're talented, strong, beautiful, and you make me happier than I ever thought possible." Sarah blushed, her heart overflowing with a love that mirrored Emily's. "You make me happy too, she whispered, reaching for Emily's hand, their fingers intertwining in a familiar gesture of love and belonging. "I love you, Sarah," Emily said, the words a soft sigh against Sarah's skin. "I love you too, Emily," Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. Their kiss, under the fading light of the summer sky, was a promise, a sealing of a bond that had been forged in the fires of heartbreak and tempered by the unwavering strength of their love. They had found each other, two souls seeking solace and finding something far greater, a love that healed, a love that empowered, a love that illuminated their world with a joy that was as boundless as the sky above. The transition from the pain of her past with Ben to the joy of her present with Emily had been a journey of self-discovery, a shedding of old patterns and beliefs, a reclaiming of the woman she was meant to be. The city lights, once a symbol of the future she had envisioned with Ben, now reflected the dazzling possibilities of a life shared with Emily, a life built on trust, respect, and a love that knew no bounds. This was her new dawn, a sunrise painted in hues of hope and happiness, a testament to the enduring power of the human heart to heal and to love again, stronger and more fiercely than ever before. Chapter 7. Embracing the Future. 5 years had passed since Sarah had made the life-altering decision to leave Ben. 5 years of healing, growth, and the blossoming of a love more profound and fulfilling than she'd ever dared to imagine. The city outside their windows no longer echoed with the hollow promises of a future that never came to be. Instead, it hummed with the vibrant energy of a life built on a foundation of trust, mutual respect, and the intoxicating freedom of being truly seen and cherished for who she was. Their shared apartment, once a battleground of unspoken resentments and the suffocating silence of a dying love, had undergone a metamorphosis as profound as Sarah's own. Gone were the muted tones and the lingering scent of a past that no longer held any power over her. Sunlight, streaming through windows no longer veiled in shadows, danced across walls painted in hues as vibrant and bold as the love that filled every corner of their shared space. Lush greenery spilled from overflowing pots, a testament to the flourishing life they had cultivated together, a living, breathing embodiment of the growth and renewal that had taken root in Sarah's soul. The air, once thick with tension and the bitter tang of unspoken words, now carried the sweet aroma of cinnamon and vanilla, the comforting scent of home-baked bread and the promise of shared meals filled with laughter and easy conversation. The transformation was more than just cosmetic. It was a reflection of the deep, abiding peace that had settled over Sarah's heart, a peace that radiated from her very being, a luminous glow that drew people in and made them feel instantly at ease. Sarah's design business, once a source of frustration and unrealized potential, had become a thriving enterprise, fueled by her newfound passion and Emily's unwavering belief in her talent. Her online store, a testament to their shared vision, showcased her creations to the world, each piece a unique expression of Sarah's artistry, each sale a resounding affirmation of her worth. But Sarah's success, though a source of immense satisfaction, paled in comparison to the joy she found in Emily's love. Emily, with her infectious laughter, her boundless empathy, and her unwavering support, had become the anchor of Sarah's world, the steady hand that guided her through the turbulent waters of self-discovery. They were a team, a force to be reckoned with, their individual strengths complementing each other perfectly, creating a dynamic that was both exhilarating and comforting. They celebrated each other's victories with unbridled enthusiasm, offered solace and encouragement during times of doubt, and navigated life's inevitable challenges with a grace and resilience that had been forged in the fires of their shared past. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they strolled hand in hand through their favorite park, the leaves ablaze in a riot of crimson and gold, Sarah stopped, turning to face Emily, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. A gentle breeze ruffled her hair, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of cooler days, a reminder of the cyclical nature of life, the constant ebb and flow that had brought them to this moment, this place of profound peace and contentment. "Emily," she began, her voice trembling with the intensity of her emotions, "I can't imagine my life without you. You've shown me what it means to be truly loved, truly cherished, truly seen. You believed in me when I doubted myself, you lifted me up when I faltered, and you loved me through the darkness until I found my way back to the light. I love you more than words can say." Emily's eyes shimmered with tears, her smile radiant, a reflection of the love that poured from Sarah's heart. "Oh, Sarah," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, "you're my everything, my soulmate, my best friend. I love you too, with every fiber of my being. You've taught me so much about strength, about resilience, about the boundless capacity of the human heart to love and to heal. You're my inspiration, my guiding star, the reason I believe in happily ever afters." She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small velvet box, its worn edges a testament to the years they had spent together, the countless adventures they had shared, the unwavering love that had bound them together through thick and thin. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as Emily opened the box, revealing a delicate silver ring, a symbol of their unwavering love and commitment, its simple elegance a reflection of the quiet strength of their bond. "Sarah," Emily said, her voice trembling with emotion, her gaze locking with Sarah's, a silent question hanging in the air between them. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she nodded, unable to speak, her heart overflowing with a joy so profound it threatened to burst. "Yes," she finally whispered, her voice a breath of pure happiness. 1,000 times yes. They sealed their promise with a kiss, their love a beacon of light in the gathering dusk, a testament to the enduring power of the human heart to heal, to grow, and to find love in the most unexpected of places. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, Sarah and Emily walked hand in hand towards their future, their laughter mingling with the rustling leaves, their hearts brimming with a happiness that radiated outward, touching everyone they encountered. Their journey, like the tapestry of the park around them, was a vibrant blend of colors, textures, and experiences. There had been moments of darkness, threads of doubt and fear woven into the fabric of their lives, but the dominant hues were those of love, joy, and the unwavering belief that they had found something rare and precious, a love that transcended the ordinary, a love that made them whole. And so, they walked on, their steps light, their hearts full, their love a beacon in the gathering darkness, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome adversity and to find happiness in the embrace of another soul. End of part 1. 5 years later, The crisp autumn air carried the scent of cinnamon and wood smoke, a familiar and comforting aroma that signaled the arrival of Sarah and Emily's favorite season. 5 years had passed since they exchanged vows in that sun-drenched meadow, 5 years of shared laughter, quiet moments of intimacy, and a love that had deepened and matured like a fine wine. Their cozy apartment, nestled in a quiet corner of the bustling city, had become a sanctuary, a haven where they could shed the weight of the world and simply be themselves. The walls, once bare and echoing with the ghosts of Sarah's past, were now adorned with a vibrant collection of artwork, a testament to their shared love of beauty and the creative spirit that flowed through both their veins. Sunlight streamed through the large bay windows, illuminating the cozy living room where Sarah sat curled up on the plush velvet sofa, a steaming mug of tea warming her hands. The gentle rhythm of Emily's movements in the kitchen, the soft clinking of dishes, and the rich aroma of spices filling the air, created a symphony of domestic bliss that Sarah had never dared to dream of. Emily emerged from the kitchen, a plate of freshly baked cinnamon rolls in hand. Her smile, warm and inviting, was as familiar and comforting as the scent of the rolls themselves. "Here you go, love," she said, placing the plate on the coffee table in front of Sarah. "Thought you might need a little pick-me-up after that long conference call." Sarah reached for Emily's hand, their fingers intertwining in a familiar gesture of love and gratitude. "You know me too well," she said, her voice soft, her eyes sparkling with affection. They settled into the comfortable silence that had become a hallmark of their relationship, a silence born not of awkwardness or lack of things to say, but of a deep understanding and a shared contentment that transcended the need for words. As they sipped their tea and savored the warm, gooey goodness of the cinnamon rolls, a gentle peace settled over them, a testament to the love that had blossomed and flourished in the fertile ground of their shared lives. The transformation in Sarah was as remarkable as the transformation in their home. The anxiety and insecurity that had once shadowed her every move had vanished, replaced by a quiet confidence and a radiant joy that emanated from within. Her eyes, once haunted by the ghosts of past hurts, now sparkled with a newfound zest for life, a reflection of the love and acceptance she had found in Emily's embrace. Her design business, fueled by her passion and Emily's unwavering support, had blossomed into a thriving enterprise. Her creations, each piece infused with her unique blend of artistry and heart, were sought after by clients from all over the world. Her success was a testament to her talent, but more importantly, it was a reflection of the deep sense of purpose and fulfillment she had found in aligning her work with her passions, a journey she had embarked on with Emily by her side, a journey that had led her to a place of profound satisfaction and creative abundance. But Sarah's greatest joy, the source of her deepest contentment, lay not in her professional achievements but in the love she shared with Emily. Emily, with her infectious laughter, her boundless empathy, and her unwavering belief in Sarah, had become the anchor of her world, the steady hand that guided her through life's inevitable storms. "What are you thinking about?" Emily asked, her voice breaking the silence, her gaze soft and inquisitive. Sarah smiled, reaching for Emily's hand, their fingers intertwining once more. "Just how lucky I am," she replied, her voice filled with a tenderness that made Emily's heart ache with love. "To have found you, to have built this life with you, it's more than I ever dared to dream of." Emily leaned in, their foreheads touching, their breath mingling in the space between them. "Me too, Sarah," she whispered, her voice husky with emotion. "Every day with you is a gift, a reminder that love can heal even the deepest wounds, that happiness is a choice we make, a choice we make together." The sound of the doorbell shattered the peaceful silence, a jarring intrusion into their private world. Sarah and Emily exchanged a knowing glance, a silent acknowledgement that the outside world, with its demands and distractions, was calling. As Sarah rose to answer the door, A flicker of apprehension crossed her face, a shadow from a past she had long since left behind. Emily, sensing her unease, rose too, her hand resting reassuringly on Sarah's lower back, a silent promise of support and protection. Standing on their doorstep, a bouquet of vibrant sunflowers in hand, was a figure from their past, a ghost they thought they'd laid to rest long ago. "Hello, Sarah." Emily. Ben's voice was soft, almost hesitant, his gaze flickering nervously between the two women, the sunflowers trembling slightly in his grasp. The scene faded to black, the air thick with unspoken tensions and resurrected emotions, the past and present colliding in a moment of profound uncertainty. Part 2. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Time seemed to stretch and warp, the familiar sounds of the city fading into a muffled drone as Sarah stared at Ben, his presence a jarring intrusion into the sanctuary she had so carefully built with Emily. The sunflowers he held, once a symbol of their shared joy, now felt like a mockery, a cruel reminder of a love that had withered and died under the weight of his neglect. Emily, her hands still firmly clasped in Sarah's, stepped forward, her body a shield between Sarah and the man who had caused her so much pain. Her voice, though soft, held a steely undercurrent that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. "Ben," Emily said, her gaze unwavering, "what are you doing here?" Ben shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between the two women, the sunflowers drooping slightly in his grasp. I just wanted to see Sarah," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "To apologize, to see if maybe." His words trailed off, the unspoken plea hanging heavy in the air. The years had etched lines on his face, a testament to the weight of regret and lost opportunities. But beneath the surface, Sarah could still see glimpses of the man she had once loved, the man who had promised her forever, the man who had ultimately broken her heart. Sarah, frozen in place, felt a maelstrom of emotions swirling within her: confusion, anger, a flicker of longing, quickly extinguished by the memory of the pain he had caused. Emily's presence, solid and reassuring beside her, was the only anchor keeping her from being swept away by the tide of memories. "Ben," Sarah said, her voice strained, "this isn't the time or the place. We have nothing to talk about." Ben winced, as if struck. He opened his mouth to speak, but Emily cut him off, her voice sharp and decisive. She said, "It's over, Ben. You need to leave." Ben's gaze hardened, a flicker of defiance sparking in his eyes. "This is between me and Sarah, Emily. Stay out of it." The air crackled with tension, the unspoken threat in Ben's words igniting a primal fear in Sarah's gut. She had seen this side of Ben before, the side that refused to acknowledge boundaries, the side that demanded control. And for a heart-stopping moment, she was transported back to their apartment, to the countless arguments, the broken promises, the suffocating weight of his emotional distance. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't alone. Emily stood beside her, a warrior guarding her heart, her unwavering gaze a shield against Ben's encroaching darkness. "No, Ben," Emily said, her voice calm but resolute. "This isn't about you anymore. It's about Sarah's happiness, her peace of mind. And you're not welcome here." The force of Emily's words, the unwavering conviction in her voice, seemed to stun Ben into silence. He took a step back, his shoulders slumping, the fight draining out of him. He looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and longing. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, his voice barely audible, "for everything." He turned and walked away, the sunflowers left abandoned on the doorstep, a final, poignant symbol of a love that had wilted and died. As the sound of Ben's footsteps faded into the distance, Sarah sagged against Emily, the adrenaline that had been coursing through her veins replaced by a wave of exhaustion. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Emily held her close, her touch a warm and comforting presence. I'll always be here for you, Sarah, she murmured, her voice filled with a love that banished the last vestiges of fear and uncertainty from Sarah's heart. They stood together for a long moment, the setting sun casting long shadows across the threshold, a symbolic dividing line between the past and the present. And as they stepped back into their apartment, closing the door firmly against the ghosts of their past, Sarah knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her soul, that she had finally found her home. Not in a place, but in the arms of the woman who loved her unconditionally, the woman who had shown her that true love wasn't about possession or control, but about acceptance, support, and the freedom to be one's authentic self. The air within their apartment, once heavy with tension, now felt light and airy, filled with the comforting scent of cinnamon and baking bread. The sunflowers, discarded on the doorstep, no longer held any power over them. They were a relic of a past that no longer defined them, a past that they had faced together and ultimately conquered. Sarah looked around their apartment, her gaze lingering on the photographs that adorned the walls, images capturing moments of joy and laughter, a testament to the life they had built together. She had finally found the peace and happiness she had yearned for, a love that nourished her soul and gave her the strength to face the future, a future that was brighter than she had ever dared to imagine. And as they stood together, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, Sarah knew, with a certainty that filled her heart with joy, that this was only the beginning of their story. Chapter 9. Whispers in the Static. 5 years had passed since Ben's ill-fated attempt to reconnect with Sarah. 5 years since Sarah had found solace and strength in Emily's love, building a life that felt as vibrant and real as the sunflowers that perpetually bloomed on their kitchen windowsill. Their shared apartment, once haunted by the echoes of Sarah's painful past with Ben, was now a sanctuary, a testament to the healing power of love and laughter. But beneath the surface of their idyllic existence, a subtle unease began to stir, like a whisper in the static, a dissonant note in a perfectly composed melody. It started with the dreams. Vivid, unsettling dreams that plagued Sarah's sleep, leaving her waking in a cold sweat, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. In these dreams, she was back in their old apartment, the one she had shared with Ben. The air was thick with tension, a palpable sense of dread clinging to the shadows. Ben was there, but he was different. His eyes, once warm and familiar, were cold and vacant, his touch no longer a source of comfort, but a violation, a chilling premonition of something sinister lurking beneath the surface. At first, Sarah dismissed the dreams as residual anxiety, the echoes of a past she had fought so hard to overcome. But as the dreams persisted, growing more vivid, more disturbing with each passing night, a prickle of fear began to take root in her heart. She tried to talk to Emily about it, but the words caught in her throat, the fear of sounding irrational, of burdening Emily with her own unresolved demons, silencing her. Adding to her unease was a series of strange occurrences that began to plague their daily life. Electronic devices malfunctioned with alarming frequency. Lights flickered erratically, plunging the apartment into sudden darkness. Static interference crackled through their phone calls, distorting voices into chilling whispers. And at night, when the city slept, Sarah swore she heard faint scratching sounds coming from inside the walls, as if something unseen were trying to claw its way into their sanctuary. Emily, ever the pragmatist, attributed these incidents to faulty wiring, aging appliances, and the general unreliability of technology in their increasingly interconnected world. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was at play, something that threatened to unravel the delicate tapestry of their happiness. One evening, as they sat down to dinner, the lights in the apartment flickered violently, plunging them into darkness. A wave of panic surged through Sarah, the familiar feeling of dread from her dreams washing over her. "Emily," Sarah gasped, her voice trembling, "did you see that? It's happening again. Emily, ever calm and collected, reached for Sarah's hand, her touch a grounding presence in the sudden darkness. It's just the wiring, Sarah, Emily said, her voice soothing. Don't worry, I'll call the electrician tomorrow. But as Emily spoke, Sarah noticed a strange, almost imperceptible shift in the air, a tingling sensation that prickled her skin. And from the darkness, a faint, almost inaudible whisper seemed to slither into her consciousness, a voice that was both familiar and utterly alien, a voice that sent a chill down her spine and froze the blood in her veins. We were never truly over, Sarah. Chapter 10. Echoes of a Broken Heart. A scream caught in Sarah's throat, a primal cry of fear that died in her chest, choked by the sudden realization that the voice, that chillingly familiar whisper, wasn't coming from the darkness around her. It was coming from inside her head. Emily, her brow furrowed with concern, reached for Sarah again, her touch seeking to ground her, to pull her back from the abyss of terror that threatened to swallow her whole. Sarah, what is it? What's wrong? Sarah, her breath ragged, her body trembling uncontrollably, could only shake her head, the words trapped in a prison of fear. She couldn't tell Emily what she had heard, couldn't explain the chilling certainty that the voice belonged to Ben. But Ben was gone. He had walked away 5 years ago, defeated and heartbroken, leaving Sarah and Emily to rebuild their lives, to forge a love that felt as strong and unbreakable as the city that surrounded them. Or so they thought. The lights flickered back on, bathing the apartment in a harsh, artificial glare, but the shadows seemed to linger, darker and more menacing than before. Sarah, still caught in the grip of terror, scanned the room frantically, her eyes searching for any sign of Ben's presence, any indication that her nightmare had bled into reality. But there was nothing. Just the familiar furniture, the soft glow of the city lights filtering through the window, the comforting scent of Emily's homemade pasta sauce simmering on the stove. It should have felt safe, normal, but the air was thick with an unseen menace, a chilling premonition of something terrible about to unfold. Sarah, honey, you're scaring me, Emily said, her voice laced with worry. Talk to me. What happened? Did you see something? Hear something? Sarah, her heart still pounding against her ribs, tried to force a smile, to downplay the terror that threatened to consume her. It's nothing, Em. Just a weird feeling. Maybe I'm coming down with something. But even as the words left her lips, Sarah knew she wasn't being truthful. This wasn't just a weird feeling. This was something deeper, something darker, something that was twisting and warping the fabric of their reality. The whispers in the static continued throughout the night, taunting Sarah, playing on her deepest fears and insecurities, reminding her of the vulnerabilities Ben had so expertly exploited during their years together. She tried to block them out, to focus on Emily's warmth beside her, the steady rhythm of her breathing, but the voice, insidious and relentless, seeped into her dreams, transforming them into a surreal landscape of terror and despair. Days turned into weeks, and the strange occurrences escalated. Electronic devices went haywire, their screens displaying distorted images and garbled messages. Phone calls were interrupted by bursts of static, punctuated by Ben's distorted voice, whispering threats, promises, and pleas, all jumbled together in a cacophony of madness. And at night, the scratching sounds inside the walls intensified, a constant reminder of an unseen presence lurking just beyond their perception, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Emily, despite her initial skepticism, began to share Sarah's unease. The sheer pervasiveness of the phenomena, the undeniable targeting of Sarah, was too much to dismiss as mere coincidence. They researched online, consulted experts, even contacted a paranormal investigator, but no one could offer a rational explanation for the events that were slowly unraveling their lives. The fear, a constant undercurrent, began to poison their once idyllic existence. They stopped going out at night, afraid of encountering whatever lurked in the shadows. They slept with the lights on, their hands instinctively reaching for each other in the darkness, seeking comfort and reassurance. And slowly, insidiously, the sanctuary they had built together began to crumble under the weight of an unseen terror. One evening, as Sarah sat at her computer, working late on a design project, the screen suddenly went black. A moment later, an image flickered into view. An image that sent a wave of ice-cold terror coursing through her veins. It was Ben, his face contorted in a grotesque parody of a smile, his eyes glowing an unnatural red, a single word displayed beneath his image in stark, white letters, "Found you." Sarah screamed, a raw, primal cry that echoed through the apartment. Emily, startled from her book, rushed to Sarah's side, her heart pounding. But when she looked at the computer screen, there was nothing there. Just the blank, white canvas of a new document. "Sarah, what is it? What did you see?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with a fear she couldn't quite conceal. Sarah, her breath ragged, her body shaking uncontrollably, could only point at the screen, her voice failing her. "Ben, he was here," she stammered, the words barely audible. Emily, her gaze flitting between the empty screen and Sarah's terrified face, tried to rationalize, to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was just a glitch, a virus. This old computer is due for an upgrade anyway. But deep down, Emily knew that this wasn't just a technical malfunction. This was something more, something sinister, something that was targeting Sarah with a chilling precision. And for the first time, Emily felt a surge of fear, a cold dread that settled deep in her bones, a terrifying premonition that the life they had built together, the love they had so carefully nurtured, was about to be shattered. Chapter 11. Walls. The image of Ben's face, contorted into a grotesque mockery of a smile, his eyes glowing an unnatural red, burned itself onto Sarah's retinas. The words beneath, stark and chilling, "Found you," echoed in the silence of the apartment long after the screen went blank. Emily, her initial attempts at rationality dissolving in the face of Sarah's raw terror, pulled Sarah into a tight embrace, her warmth a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. "It's okay, Sarah," she murmured into Sarah's hair, her voice a trembling counterpoint to the pounding of Sarah's heart. "We're safe. We're together." But the words felt hollow, even to Emily. The sanctuary they had so carefully constructed, a haven from the storms of Sarah's past, was now under siege. The unseen menace that had haunted Sarah's dreams, the whispers in the static, had crossed the threshold, a malevolent entity with a singular focus, Sarah. Sleep became a battlefield. Sarah, haunted by nightmares of Ben's twisted visage, would wake in a cold sweat, the echo of his voice, "We were never truly over." Sarah, resonating in the silence of their bedroom. Emily, her own sleep disrupted by Sarah's fear, would hold her close, whispering reassurances, her touch the only anchor in a world that was rapidly spinning out of control. The strange occurrences escalated, their intensity mirroring Sarah's growing terror. Lights flickered violently, appliances malfunctioned with alarming regularity, their apartment transforming into a haunted house straight out of a horror film. Music would start playing spontaneously, a discordant symphony of static and Ben's distorted voice, whispering threats, promises, and pleas, all jumbled together in a cacophony of madness. Emily, her initial skepticism replaced by a growing sense of dread, tried to maintain a facade of normalcy. She called electricians, consulted tech support, even went so far as to have the apartment checked for gas leaks, hoping to find a rational explanation for the increasingly disturbing phenomena. But the reality of their situation was undeniable. Whatever was happening, it was targeted, it was personal, and it was centered on Sarah. Their shared life, once a haven of warmth and stability, was slowly being dismantled, brick by brick, replaced by a chilling fear that permeated every aspect of their existence. One evening, as Sarah sat at her desk, sketching designs for a new project, she felt a cold hand brush against the back of her neck. She whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat, expecting to see Ben's distorted face leering at her. But there was nothing there. Just the empty room, the shadows stretching across the wall, the faint hum of the city outside their window. "Emily?" she called out, her voice shaky, the need for reassurance overwhelming. Emily, emerging from the kitchen, a cup of tea in hand, looked at Sarah with concern. "What is it, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sarah shook her head, trying to downplay her fear. "It's nothing. Just thought I felt something," but the lie tasted bitter on her tongue. She knew what she had felt. A touch, cold, possessive, a phantom caress that sent a shiver down her spine. It was a chilling confirmation of her deepest fear. Ben, or whatever entity had taken his form, had found a way to breach the walls of their reality. As the days bled into weeks, the line between dreams and reality blurred. Sarah began to see fleeting glimpses of Ben everywhere, in the flickering shadows of their apartment, reflected in the glass of shop windows, even in the faces of strangers on the crowded city streets. Emily, witnessing Sarah's unraveling, felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. She tried everything she could think of: meditation, aromatherapy, even a weekend getaway to a secluded cabin in the woods, hoping to provide Sarah with a respite from the relentless terror. But nothing worked. The whispers, the visions, the unseen touch, they followed Sarah, relentless as a shadow, a constant reminder of Ben's malevolent presence, a haunting echo of a love that had turned into a nightmare. They were trapped in a waking horror film, the villain an entity they couldn't see, couldn't fight, an entity that seemed to feed on Sarah's fear, growing stronger with each passing day. Their once vibrant and loving relationship was strained to the breaking point. Sarah, consumed by fear, withdrew into herself, pushing Emily away, unable to explain the terror that was tearing her apart. Emily, desperate to save Sarah, to pull her back from the abyss of madness, felt her own strength falter, the foundations of her own sanity cracking under the pressure. One evening, as they sat in the living room, the silence thick with unspoken anxieties, Sarah finally broke down. "I can't live like this anymore, Emily," she whispered, her voice hoarse with unshed tears. "I feel like I'm going crazy." Emily, her heart breaking at the sight of Sarah's despair, reached for her hand, her touch conveying a depth of love and empathy that transcended words. "You're not going crazy, Sarah," she said, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together. I won't let it take you." But as Emily spoke, the lights in the apartment flickered once again, plunging them into darkness. And from the shadows, a voice, cold and disembodied, echoed through the room, a voice that sent a shiver down both their spines and froze the blood in their veins. "You can't hide from me, Sarah. You can't escape. We belong together." The darkness seemed to pulse around them, a living entity, closing in, suffocating, the air thick with a malevolent presence. And in that terrifying moment, as the walls of their sanctuary crumbled around them, Sarah and Emily knew that their fight for survival had just begun. Chapter 12. Fight or Flight. The voice, a chilling echo of Ben's, seemed to slither through the darkness, wrapping around Sarah and Emily like icy tendrils. It wasn't just sound, it was a sensation, a violation of their safe space, their very minds. Emily instinctively pulled Sarah closer, her heart thundering against her ribs. The darkness pulsed with an unseen energy, a malevolent entity that seemed to feed on Sarah's fear. The once familiar walls of their apartment felt like a cage, closing in on them, suffocating. "We have to get out of here," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. the words catching in her throat. Sarah, paralyzed by terror, clung to Emily, her mind a swirling vortex of images and emotions. She saw Ben's face, twisted into a grotesque mask of anger and longing, his eyes glowing red in the darkness. She heard his voice, a guttural rasp, whispering promises and threats, his words a twisted parody of the love they once shared. Emily, sensing Sarah's paralysis, took charge. She grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her towards the door. "Come on, Sarah, we need to move. Now." The apartment seemed to resist their escape. The door, usually smooth and silent, stuck in its frame, as if held shut by an unseen force. The lights flickered erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls, amplifying the feeling of impending doom. Emily, adrenaline coursing through her veins, shoved against the door with all her might. The wood creaked and groaned, finally giving way with a splintering crash. They stumbled into the hallway, the cool air outside their apartment a welcome relief from the suffocating presence that lingered within. But the escape was short-lived. As they turned to flee down the hallway, the lights flickered out, plunging the corridor into absolute darkness. A cold wind swept through the building, carrying with it a wave of icy energy that seemed to freeze the air in their lungs. Sarah, Ben's voice, distorted and chilling, echoed through the darkness. "You can run, but you can't hide. I'll always find you." The darkness pressed in on them, a tangible entity, suffocating, malevolent. Sarah could feel Ben's presence all around them, a suffocating weight, a predatory hunger that chilled her to the bone. They were trapped, hunted, prey to an unseen force that seemed to control their reality. "We need to get to the stairs," Emily said, her voice tight with urgency. "Come on, Sarah, we can make it." They stumbled through the darkness, their hands clasped tightly together, the only source of comfort in the face of overwhelming fear. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, a static charge that sent shivers down their spines. As they reached the stairwell door, a wave of icy air washed over them, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of Ben's cologne, a phantom memory of a love turned toxic, a haunting reminder of the danger that stalked them. The door swung open with a loud bang, revealing the dimly lit stairwell. Emily pulled Sarah through the doorway, their escape route seemingly clear. But as they turned to descend the stairs, a figure materialized at the top of the landing. It was Ben, but not the Ben Sarah remembered. His face was twisted into a mask of rage and longing, his eyes glowing an unnatural red, his body seemingly distorted, elongated, as if stretched by an unseen force. He stood there, blocking their escape, a figure of pure menace, his presence a chilling reminder that the nightmare was far from over. "Leaving so soon, Sarah?" he said, his voice a distorted echo of the man he once was. "The fun is just beginning." And with a chilling smile that sent shivers down their spines, Ben reached out, his hand morphing into a claw, ready to claim his prize. Chapter 13. The Reckoning. Time seemed to stop. The air in the stairwell thickened, vibrating with an unnatural energy that crackled and popped like static electricity. Sarah, her breath caught in her throat, felt a scream building inside her, a primal cry of fear and defiance, but it was trapped, choked by the sheer terror that gripped her. Emily, her instincts taking over, shoved Sarah behind her, a shield of fierce protectiveness against the monstrous figure that stood between them and their escape. "Get back, Ben," she shouted, her voice ringing with a power that surprised even herself. "Don't come any closer." Ben, or whatever entity had twisted itself into his former likeness, paused, his clawed hand hovering in the air, his glowing red eyes fixed on Sarah with a chilling intensity. A grotesque smile stretched across his face, pulling his lips taut against his teeth, a mockery of the warmth she once found so endearing. "Emily," he hissed, his voice a distorted growl, a sound that scraped against her nerves like sandpaper. "This doesn't concern you. Step aside." "The hell it doesn't," Emily retorted, her defiance blazing in her eyes. Sarah is with me now. You have no claim on her. You lost that right a long time ago. Ben's smile vanished, replaced by a snarl of rage that contorted his features into a mask of pure malice. You think you can protect her? He sneered, his voice dripping with venom. You think you can keep her safe from me? I am a part of her, Emily. I am woven into the fabric of her being. I will always find a way. He lunged, his clawed hand reaching for Sarah, a blur of motion that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Emily reacted instantly, shoving Sarah hard against the wall, then spinning to face Ben, her fist connecting with his jaw with a sickening thud. The force of the blow sent Ben stumbling backward, his head snapping back. A startled gasp escaped Sarah's lips as she watched the scene unfold, a bizarre mix of horror and awe swirling within her. She had never seen Emily like this fierce protector, this warrior goddess battling a demon from her past. Ben shook his head, as if trying to clear the cobwebs. His eyes, glowing with an unnatural intensity, fixed on Emily, his smile returning, even more menacing than before. Feisty, he chuckled, his voice dripping with mockery. I like that. But you're playing a dangerous game, Emily. You're meddling in forces you don't understand. He lunged again, faster this time, his claws slashing the air where Emily had stood a moment before. Emily dodged, narrowly avoiding his attack, her heart pounding in her chest. We're not afraid of you, Ben, Emily said, her voice unwavering, even as her breath came in ragged gasps. Whatever you are, whatever you've become, we're stronger than you. Sarah is stronger than you. And we're not letting you take her. Ben laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that echoed through the stairwell. Stronger, he scoffed. You think love is your weapon? Love is a weakness, Emily. It's what binds you, what holds you back. It's what will ultimately destroy you. He lunged again, his movements fluid and predatory, his claws a blur of deadly intent. Emily dodged, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew she couldn't win this fight with brute force. Ben, or whatever entity had taken him over, was too powerful, too driven. She needed a different strategy, something that would tap into the very core of his being, something that would exploit his weakness, not her own. You're wrong, Ben, she said, her voice ringing with conviction. Love isn't a weakness. It's the most powerful force in the universe. It's what gives us strength, what binds us together, what makes us fight for what we believe in. And you, Ben, you've forgotten what love truly is. You've let it twist and warp into something ugly, something destructive. She took a step toward him, her gaze unwavering, her heart pounding in her chest. But Sarah hasn't forgotten, she continued, her voice gaining strength. She remembers the love you shared, the good times, the moments that made you both believe in forever. And that love, Ben, that's what's going to defeat you. Because it's stronger than your hate, stronger than your fear, stronger than whatever darkness has consumed you. Sarah, watching the exchange, felt a wave of emotion wash over her, a mix of terror and a fierce determination. Emily was right. Love was their weapon, their shield, their only hope against the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Ben stared at Emily, his glowing red eyes narrowed, his expression a mixture of fury and confusion. Emily's words seemed to pierce through the haze of his rage, striking a chord deep within him, a chord that vibrated with a long-forgotten melody, a melody of love, of tenderness, of a past he had tried to erase. He staggered back, his clawed hand falling to his side, the predatory glint in his eyes fading, replaced by a flicker of doubt, a glimmer of the man he once was. No, he whispered, his voice raspy, the distortion fading, replaced by a tone that was almost human. No, you're wrong. I don't remember. He clutched at his head, his features contorting in pain, as if 1,000 memories were battling for dominance within his mind. "Stop it!" he roared, his voice echoing through the stairwell. "Make it stop!" He sank to his knees, his body racked with tremors, the monstrous form flickering, shifting, as if struggling to maintain its hold. Emily reached for Sarah, pulling her close, their bodies a united front against the darkness that swirled around them. "Fight it, Ben," Emily said, her voice firm but compassionate. "Remember who you are. Remember the love. Don't let it win." Sarah, her fear giving way to a surge of determination, stepped forward, her hand reaching out to Ben, her touch tentative but filled with the memory of the love they once shared. "Ben," she whispered, her voice trembling but filled with a newfound strength. "I know you're still in there. I can feel it. Fight it. Come back to us." And in that moment, something shifted. The air crackled with a new energy, a surge of light that seemed to push back the darkness, a wave of hope that washed over them all. Ben looked up, his eyes flickering between Sarah and Emily, the monstrous red glow fading, replaced by a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of the warmth she once knew. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice strained, the distortion almost gone. "Emily?" He reached out, his hand trembling, no longer a claw, but a hand that yearned for connection, for redemption. And as Sarah and Emily reached back, their hands meeting his, a surge of energy pulsed through the stairwell, a wave of light that banished the shadows, a symphony of hope that echoed through the night. The darkness retreated, the monstrous form dissolving, leaving behind only Ben, weak and confused, but undeniably human. He collapsed into their arms, his body racked with sobs, the weight of his transformation, the horror of what he had become, finally crashing down upon him. They held him, their touch a balm against the darkness that still lingered, their love a beacon of hope in the aftermath of the storm. The battle was over, the nightmare was finally ending, and as they stood there, united against the forces that had threatened to tear them apart, Sarah, Emily, and Ben knew that they had been forever changed by the ordeal, their bonds forged in the fires of terror and love, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to survive, to heal, and to love again. Chapter 14. Afterward. The silence in the stairwell was deafening. It pressed in on them, a physical weight, heavier than the darkness that had just receded. The only sound was Ben's ragged breathing, each inhale a shuddering gasp, each exhale a tremor of relief. He was slumped between Sarah and Emily, their bodies forming a protective barrier around him, their hands still intertwined, the warmth of their touch anchoring him to reality, to humanity. The adrenaline that had surged through them during the confrontation with Ben's monstrous form was slowly receding, leaving behind a trembling exhaustion, a vulnerability that felt both raw and exhilarating. The air still crackled with a residual energy, a faint echo of the darkness that had threatened to consume them all. But it was fading, replaced by a sense of peace, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. Sarah looked down at Ben, his face pale and drawn, his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling with each laboured breath. His transformation had been terrifying, a grotesque distortion of the man she once loved, but now, in the aftermath, she saw only vulnerability, a lost soul struggling to find his way back to the light. A wave of compassion washed over her, an unexpected tenderness that surprised her. Despite the pain he had caused her, the fear he had instilled, she couldn't help but feel a surge of empathy. He was broken, lost, and in that moment, she understood that healing wouldn't come from anger or retribution, but from forgiveness, from a willingness to extend a hand, to help him climb out of the abyss. She squeezed his hand gently, her thumb stroking his knuckles, a silent reassurance. He stirred slightly, his eyelids fluttering, his gaze slowly focusing on her face. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible. "Is that really you?" She smiled, her heart aching with a bittersweet mix of sadness and relief. "It's me, Ben. We're here. You're safe now." He blinked, his eyes searching her face, as if trying to reconcile the image of the woman he loved with the monstrous entity he had become. What happened?" he asked, his voice strained, a tremor of fear underlying his words. "It's okay, Ben," Emily said, her voice soft and reassuring. "We'll explain everything. Just rest for now. You're safe with us." He nodded weakly, closing his eyes again, surrendering to the exhaustion that pulled at him, the weight of his transformation leaving him drained and vulnerable. They helped him to his feet, their bodies supporting his weakened frame. He leaned heavily on them, his steps unsteady, his gaze darting around the stairwell as if he expected the darkness to return, to claim him once more. "Easy, Ben," Sarah said, her voice a calming presence amidst the lingering unease. "We're right here. We won't let you go." They made their way slowly down the stairs, their movements a synchronized dance of support and protection. The stairwell, once a scene of terror and chaos, now felt like a passage, a transition between the darkness they had just escaped and the uncertain light of a new beginning. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, they were met by the concerned faces of their neighbors, drawn by the commotion, their expressions shifting from curiosity to relief as they saw Ben, weak but human, supported by the women who loved him. "Is he all right?" Mrs. Peterson asked, her voice laced with worry. "We heard shouting, a struggle." "He's okay," Emily said, her voice firm, her gaze meeting Mrs. Peterson's with a quiet authority. "He just needs some rest. We're taking him home now." Mrs. Peterson nodded, her expression softening. "Take care of him, dear. He's lucky to have you both." They guided Ben through the lobby, the weight of their neighbors' gazes a tangible reminder that their ordeal had not gone unnoticed, that the boundaries between their private lives and the outside world had been breached. The night air was cool against their skin as they emerged from the building, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the stairwell. The city lights, once a source of unease, now felt like a beacon, a symbol of the world they were fighting to reclaim. They helped Ben into the back seat of Emily's car, his body slumping against the leather, his exhaustion palpable. Sarah and Emily exchanged a look, a silent communication of shared responsibility, a determination to see this through, to help Ben heal, to rebuild their lives, together. As they drove away from the building, the shadows of the night seemed to recede, the city lights illuminating their path forward, a promise of a new chapter, a journey of healing, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. Chapter 15. Sanctuary. Emily's car sliced through the quiet streets, the rhythmic hum of the engine a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil swirling within them. Sarah, perched on the edge of the passenger seat, glanced back at Ben, his form slumped against the leather, his chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. He seemed smaller now, stripped of the monstrous energy that had possessed him, a fragility clinging to him that tugged at her heartstrings. The city lights, usually a vibrant tapestry of color and movement, seemed muted tonight, as if mirroring the somber mood that had settled over them. Sarah leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, the cityscapes blurring into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. 1,000 questions buzzed in her mind, each one a thread in a tangled web she couldn't unravel. What had happened to Ben? What force had twisted him into that terrifying creature? And most importantly, was he truly safe now? Or was this just a lull before the storm returned? Emily, sensing Sarah's unease, reached across the console, her hand finding Sarah's, their fingers intertwining in a silent pact of strength and support. Sarah squeezed back, drawing comfort from the warmth of Emily's touch, the steadiness of her presence a beacon in the swirling sea of doubt. They reached their apartment building, the familiar brick facade looming before them, a symbol of the life they had built together, a haven they had fiercely protected from the shadows of the past. But tonight, Even the sanctuary of their home felt vulnerable, the invisible tendrils of fear seeping through the cracks, a chilling reminder that the darkness they had faced in the stairwell was not easily confined. They helped Ben out of the car, his legs shaky beneath him, his gaze fixed on the ground as if afraid to meet their eyes. He stumbled slightly, and Emily's arm instinctively went around his waist, steadying him. Sarah watched, a mix of emotions swirling within her, concern, apprehension, and a lingering trace of the affection that had once bound them together. Inside the apartment, the silence felt heavy, punctuated only by the soft hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Sarah led Ben to the couch, helping him settle into the cushions. He sat there, his shoulders slumped, his gaze lost in the intricate patterns of the Persian rug beneath his feet. Emily disappeared into the kitchen, returning a few moments later with a glass of water and a soft blanket. She placed the glass on the coffee table in front of Ben, her touch gentle, her movements conveying a tenderness that belied the tension that crackled in the air. "Here, Ben," she said, her voice soft but firm, a grounding presence amidst the swirling uncertainty. "Drink this. You need to stay hydrated." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time since they had left the stairwell. There was a flicker of gratitude in his gaze, a glimmer of the man she had once known, buried beneath layers of pain and confusion. He took the glass, his hands trembling slightly, his fingers brushing hers as he accepted the offering. He took a sip, the water seeming to soothe him, easing the tightness in his throat, the tremor in his limbs. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible, "for everything." Sarah sat down on the opposite end of the couch, maintaining a safe distance, her gaze fixed on him, her mind racing. She wanted to demand answers, to understand what had happened, to know if he was truly back, or if this was just another cruel trick of fate. But she held back, sensing that now was not the time for interrogation, that healing required a gentler approach. Emily sat down beside Sarah, her presence a silent reassurance, a reminder that they were in this together, that they would face whatever came next, as they always had, side by side. The silence stretched out, punctuated only by the soft clinking of the ice cubes in Ben's glass and the steady rhythm of their breathing. Sarah watched as Ben finished the water, his movements slow and deliberate, his gaze drifting back to the rug, as if he were trying to find solace in its familiar patterns. Finally, Emily broke the silence, her voice gentle, her tone measured. "Ben," she began, "what do you remember?" He flinched slightly at the question, his body tensing, his gaze darting around the room as if searching for an escape. He stammered, his voice strained, the words catching in his throat. I don't know. It's all a blur." He closed his eyes, his face contorting in a grimace of pain, as if the effort of remembering was physically agonizing. "It's okay, Ben," Sarah said, her voice soft, surprising herself with the tenderness that flowed through her. "Take your time. We're here for you." He opened his eyes, his gaze locking with hers, a mixture of confusion and gratitude swirling in their depths. "Why?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Why are you being so kind?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations, the echoes of past hurts reverberating in the silence. Sarah took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling beneath the soft fabric of her sweater. She knew that answering his question, truly answering it, required a level of honesty, a willingness to confront the complexities of their shared history that she hadn't been ready for, until now. "Because," she said, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering, "despite everything, we still care about you, Ben. You were a part of our lives, a part of our story, and we can't simply erase that. And even though you hurt us, even though you scared us, we believe that somewhere, deep inside, the man we once loved still exists, and we want to help him find his way back." Her words hung in the air, the weight of their meaning settling over them like a soft blanket, a promise of healing, a flicker of hope in the darkness. Ben stared at her, his eyes wide, his expression a mixture of disbelief and a yearning so raw, so vulnerable, that it broke her heart. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling, his touch hesitant, as if afraid of shattering the fragile moment of connection they had forged. Sarah, her heart pounding in her chest, met his gaze, her own hand instinctively reaching out, their fingers brushing, the warmth of their touch a spark in the darkness, a fragile bridge between the past and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Chapter 16. Fractured reflections. The touch, fleeting as it was, sent a shockwave through Sarah, a jolt of electricity that sparked a cascade of memories, both sweet and agonizing. Ben's hand, calloused yet gentle, had once been her anchor, a source of comfort and strength. Now, it felt foreign, charged with an unsettling energy that sent shivers down her spine. She pulled back instinctively, the warmth of his touch replaced by a sudden chill, a visceral reminder of the pain he had caused, the trust he had shattered. The air in the room thickened, the comfortable silence morphing into a palpable tension that pressed down on them, a suffocating weight that threatened to crush the fragile truce they had forged. Ben recoiled as if struck, his hand falling back to his lap, his shoulders slumping further, his gaze dropping to the floor. The flicker of hope that had illuminated his features just moments ago dimmed, replaced by a familiar shadow of defeat. Emily, ever vigilant, shifted on the couch, her body language a subtle but unmistakable barrier between Sarah and Ben. Her hand, still intertwined with Sarah's, tightened its grip, a silent message of support, a reminder that they were a united front, that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. Sarah, Ben began, his voice a raspy whisper, the words heavy with regret. I know I hurt you, both of you, and I don't expect you to forgive me, not yet. But I need you to understand, what happened, it wasn't me, not completely. His words, halting and fragmented, hung in the air, a plea for understanding, a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm that separated them. Sarah, her emotions warring within her, met his gaze, her own expression a complex mix of skepticism, apprehension, and a flicker of the empathy that had always been her Achilles heel. What do you mean, not completely? She asked, her voice a careful balance of curiosity and caution. What happened to you, Ben? What changed you? Ben's gaze darted around the room, his eyes flitting from the familiar furniture to the framed photographs on the walls, each image a snapshot of a life they had once shared, a life that now felt as distant and unreal as a half-remembered dream. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving as if the weight of his memories was a physical burden. It started slowly, he said, his voice low and hesitant, the words tumbling out in a torrent of confession. After you left, Sarah, I was lost. I felt like a part of me was missing, like I was adrift in a sea of emptiness. He paused, his gaze meeting hers, a plea for understanding in his eyes. I tried to move on, to find a way to fill the void. I threw myself into work. I started going to therapy. I even tried dating again. But nothing worked. The emptiness, it grew. His voice trailed off, the memory of his despair, his descent into darkness, still vivid, still raw. And then the dream started. Sarah stiffened, a chill coursing down her spine. The dreams. She had experienced them too. Nightmares filled with Ben's distorted presence, his touch a violation, his voice a chilling echo in the darkness. What were they like? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, afraid of what he might reveal, afraid of the darkness that might be unleashed. Ben's gaze dropped to the floor, his hands clenching into fists, his body trembling as if fighting against an unseen force. They were vivid, terrifying. I was trapped, Sarah. Trapped in a world that wasn't my own. A world where everything was twisted, distorted. He looked up, his eyes wide with a terror that mirrored her own. And I wasn't alone. There was something else there. Something dark. Something hungry. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine, the hair on the back of her neck prickling with a primal fear. She remembered the chilling presence she had felt in the stairwell, the monstrous energy that had emanated from Ben, the terrifying transformation that had left her trembling in its wake. What was it? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ben shook his head, his face contorting in a grimace of pain and confusion. I don't know. I couldn't see it clearly. It was like a shadow, a darkness that clung to me, that fed on my despair. He closed his eyes, his body racked with a shuddering sob. It whispered to me, Sarah, whispered promises, whispered lies. It told me that I could have you back, that I could erase the pain, that we could start over. His words, laced with a self-loathing that mirrored her own, pierced through her carefully constructed defenses, a painful reminder of the vulnerabilities they both shared, the wounds that still festered beneath the surface. But it was a lie, Sarah. A cruel, twisted lie. It took control of me, Sarah. Twisted me into something monstrous. He looked up, his eyes pleading for her to believe him, to see through the darkness that had consumed him, to recognize the man he once was, the man he desperately wanted to be again. Sarah, her heart aching with a mix of pity and a lingering trace of the love that refused to be extinguished, reached out a hand, her fingers hovering just above his, a silent offering of comfort, a gesture of understanding that transcended words. The room was silent, the air thick with the weight of their shared history, the ghosts of their past hovering around them like specters, their presence a tangible reminder of the fragile nature of love, the destructive power of secrets, and the enduring hope for redemption. Chapter 17. Betrayal. The air in the room hung heavy, charged with a volatile mix of emotions. Ben's confession, raw and vulnerable, had cracked open the carefully constructed walls Sarah and Emily had built around their hearts. Sarah, her hand still hovering above Ben's, felt a wave of empathy wash over her. The Ben sitting before her, stripped of his monstrous facade, was a shadow of the man she once loved, his eyes haunted by a darkness that mirrored her own. Emily, observing the exchange with a guarded silence, felt a knot of unease tightening in her chest. She trusted Sarah, with a fierceness that bordered on devotion, but the undeniable pull between Sarah and Ben, a bond forged in the crucible of shared history and heartbreak, sent a tremor of insecurity through her usually steadfast heart. Ben, Sarah said softly, her voice a gentle counterpoint to the storm brewing within her. What you're describing, it sounds terrifying. She remembered her own nightmares, the chilling feeling of Ben's presence, distorted and menacing, invading her dreams, leaving her trembling in the cold light of dawn. Ben nodded, a shudder running through his frame. It was, he whispered, his voice ragged, worse than anything I could have imagined. I felt like I was losing myself, Sarah, like something else was taking over. A silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, each tick a stark reminder of the precious time that had been lost, the opportunities squandered, the love that had been fractured. Sarah, her gaze fixed on Ben's face, saw the remnants of the man she had once loved, the man she had believed in, the man she had hoped to build a future with. But the lines etched around his eyes, the haunted look in his gaze, spoke of a battle fought and lost, a darkness that lingered beneath the surface, a constant threat to the fragile peace he had found. Emily, unable to contain her unease any longer, spoke, her voice a carefully controlled blend of concern and apprehension. "Ben, what are you saying? Do you think this thing, is still connected to you?" Ben lifted his gaze, his eyes meeting Emily's, the intensity of his stare a stark contrast to his previous demeanor. "I don't know," he said, his voice low and gravelly, a tremor of fear underlying his words. "But I know this, it's not finished with Sarah. It wants her back." A wave of ice-cold dread washed over Sarah, the hair on the back of her neck prickling with a primal fear. The nightmares, the strange occurrences in their apartment, the chilling feeling of being watched, it all made sense now. The darkness that had consumed Ben, the entity that had twisted his love into something monstrous, was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its chance to strike. Emily, her protective instincts surging to the forefront, rose from the couch, her hand instinctively reaching for Sarah's, her grip tightening reassuringly. "We won't let it hurt her, Ben," she said, her voice firm and unwavering, her gaze meeting his with a challenge that brooked no argument. "We'll protect her," Emily continued, her voice softening, her thumb stroking Sarah's hand in a soothing gesture. "We'll fight this, together." Sarah, feeling the warmth of Emily's hand in hers, the strength of her presence beside her, drew a shaky breath, her fear momentarily receding in the face of Emily's unwavering support. But deep down, a seed of doubt remained, a nagging voice whispering in the back of her mind, reminding her of her own vulnerabilities, her own history of making choices that led to pain and heartbreak. Could she truly trust herself to resist the pull of the past, the familiar comfort of Ben's presence, the seductive allure of a love that had once consumed her? The weeks that followed were a blur of heightened anxiety and strained interactions. Sarah found herself drawn to Ben, a moth to a flickering flame, his vulnerability awakening a protectiveness within her that she hadn't realized still existed. They talked, cautiously at first, sharing memories, reminiscing about the dreams they had once dared to build together, their conversations a fragile dance around the gaping wound of their shared past. Emily, sensing the shift in Sarah's demeanor, tried to remain optimistic, to trust in the strength of their bond, but a sliver of fear wormed its way into her heart, a persistent shadow that darkened even the brightest moments. She watched Sarah and Ben, the unspoken connection between them a tangible presence in the room, a silent reminder of the powerful hold the past could have on the present. As the weeks turned into months, a strange dynamic emerged. Sarah found herself confiding in Ben, sharing her fears about the entity that haunted them, the strange occurrences that plagued their lives, the growing sense of dread that shadowed their every move. Ben, in turn, seemed to find solace in Sarah's understanding, her willingness to see beyond the darkness that had consumed him. Their late-night talks, fueled by shared anxiety and whispered confessions, became a lifeline, a shared space where they could unravel the tangled threads of their past, confronting the ghosts that haunted them, seeking solace in the familiarity of each other's presence. Emily, increasingly isolated, felt a coldness creep into her heart, a bitterness that tasted like betrayal. She tried to be understanding, to rationalize Sarah's need for connection, but the sight of them together, their heads bent close, their laughter echoing through the apartment, ignited a firestorm of jealousy and resentment within her. One particularly difficult evening, after a particularly unsettling encounter with a flickering light and a disembodied voice whispering Ben's name, Sarah found herself seeking comfort in Ben's arms. They sat together on the couch, Sarah's head resting on Ben's shoulder, his hand stroking her hair, his presence a temporary shield against the fear that gnawed at her soul. As the night deepened, their conversation turned intimate, their shared vulnerability creating a dangerous intimacy that blurred the lines between comfort and desire. And in a moment of weakness, fueled by fear and a longing for the familiar, Sarah found herself kissing Ben, his lips, once so familiar, now tasting of salt and desperation. The kiss deepened, a forbidden fire igniting between them, a desperate attempt to recapture a love that had been lost, a reckless disregard for the consequences of their actions. They made love that night, on the couch where Emily had so often held Sarah, comforted her, whispered words of love and reassurance. It was a desperate act, fueled by fear and a longing for connection, a betrayal of the trust that had been so carefully rebuilt. The morning light, filtering through the blinds, brought with it a wave of shame and regret. Sarah, lying beside Ben, his arm draped possessively across her waist, felt a coldness settle in her heart, a realization that in seeking comfort in the arms of her past, she had betrayed the love that held her future. Emily, waking in their empty bed, the sheets cold and unforgiving, knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that something had shifted irrevocably. A crack had appeared in the foundation of their love, a betrayal that might prove impossible to mend. Chapter 18. Shattered. The apartment was silent, the air thick with a suffocating guilt that clung to Sarah like a second skin. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting harsh stripes across the rumpled sheets, illuminating the empty space beside her where Emily should have been. The scent of Emily's lavender-infused soap, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a cruel reminder of the trust she had shattered. She slipped out of bed, her movements stiff and awkward, her body a battlefield of conflicting desires and crushing remorse. The memory of the previous night, the heat of Ben's touch, the desperate hunger in his kiss, now felt tainted, a violation of the sanctuary she had found with Emily. She found Emily in the kitchen, standing by the window, her slender frame outlined against the backdrop of the city. She was dressed for work, her hair pulled back in its usual sleek ponytail, her demeanor calm and collected, a stark contrast to the storm raging within Sarah. Emily turned as Sarah entered the room, her gaze steady, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, each tick of the kitchen clock amplifying the distance that had grown between them, a chasm carved by betrayal and unspoken fears. "Emily," Sarah began, her voice a broken whisper, but the words died in her throat, choked by the lump of guilt that had lodged itself there. How could she explain the inexplicable? How could she justify the betrayal that had stained their love? Emily raised a hand, silencing her before she could utter another word. "Don't," Emily said, her voice flat, devoid of the warmth that usually radiated from her. "Don't try to explain. Don't try to apologize. Just don't." Her words, sharp and cold, pierced Sarah deeper than any accusation could have. She saw a flicker of pain in Emily's eyes, a glimpse of the devastation she had caused, and in that moment, Sarah felt the full weight of her actions, the crushing realization that she had broken something precious, something irreplaceable. "I'm so sorry, Emily," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know what came over me. I wasn't thinking." "No," Emily interrupted, her voice sharp, the pain in her eyes hardening into a cold fury that Sarah had never witnessed before. "You weren't thinking. You weren't thinking about me. You weren't thinking about us. You were thinking about yourself, about your own fear, about your own needs." Each word was a blow, stripping away Sarah's defenses, leaving her raw and exposed, the shame burning through her like a wildfire. "Emily, please," Sarah pleaded, reaching for Emily's hand, but Emily pulled away, her touch a searing indictment. "Don't touch me," Emily said, her voice a low growl, a primal warning that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. "I can't bear to be touched by you right now. Not after what you did." The air thickened, the unspoken accusation hanging between them, a suffocating weight that threatened to crush Sarah. She wanted to scream, to rail against the unfairness of it all, to plead for a second chance, but the words died in her throat, choked by the bitter truth of Emily's accusations. She had betrayed Emily. She had shattered the trust that had been the foundation of their love. And now, she was facing the consequences, the agonizing realization that the love she had taken for granted, the love she had so carelessly jeopardized, might be slipping away, lost in the wreckage of her own weakness and the haunting shadows of her past. Chapter 19. Ghost. The apartment was a tomb, the silence broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor on the bedside table. Emily lay in bed, her once vibrant features pale and drawn, her breath shallow and ragged. The lavender walls, once a testament to her love of life, now felt like the walls of a prison, closing in on her, suffocating her. Sarah sat beside the bed, her hand clasped tightly around Emily's, her gaze fixed on the rise and fall of Emily's chest, willing her to take another breath, to fight against the darkness that was slowly claiming her. The guilt was a heavy weight in her stomach, a constant reminder of her betrayal, a poison that seeped into every moment, every thought, every breath. Emily's illness had progressed rapidly, a cruel and relentless thief that had stolen her strength, her vitality, and, Sarah feared, her spirit. The vibrant woman who had once filled Sarah's world with laughter and light was now a fragile shadow, her once bright eyes clouded with pain and exhaustion. "Emily," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse with unshed tears, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." But Emily's eyes remained closed, her breathing shallow, her grip on Sarah's hand weak and unsteady. The heart monitor beeped steadily, a relentless metronome counting down the seconds, the minutes, the hours. Sarah leaned closer, her lips brushing against Emily's ear, her voice a trembling plea. "Please, Emily, fight. Fight for us. Fight for me." But Emily remained unresponsive, lost in a world of pain and shadows, a world that Sarah could no longer reach. The air in the room shifted, a subtle change that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. The scent of lavender, once a comforting reminder of Emily's presence, now carried a faint metallic tang, a whisper of something cold and alien. The heart monitor beeped erratically, its steady rhythm disrupted, the sound a jarring counterpoint to the growing sense of unease that filled the room. Sarah's gaze darted around the room, her senses on high alert. The shadows seemed to deepen, stretching across the walls like grasping claws, the air thick with an unseen energy that prickled her skin. A low hum, barely audible at first, began to vibrate through the air, growing louder, more insistent, a mechanical thrum that seemed to resonate deep within Sarah's bones. It was a sound she had heard before, in the darkest recesses of her nightmares, a sound that heralded the arrival of something sinister, something that threatened to shatter the fragile peace of their sanctuary. The humming intensified, filling the room, vibrating through the walls, the furniture, the very air she breathed. And then, from the depths of the shadows, a voice, cold and disembodied, whispered her name. Sarah. It was Ben's voice, but distorted, twisted, stripped of its humanity, replaced by a chilling mechanical echo. "We're not finished yet, Sarah." Sarah recoiled, her heart pounding against her ribs, her breath catching in her throat. Fear, cold and primal, gripped her, paralyzing her, turning her blood to ice. She looked at Emily, her gaze pleading for a sign, a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of hope. But Emily remained still, her face pale and lifeless, her chest barely rising and falling. The heart monitor beeped erratically, its frantic rhythm a terrifying counterpoint to the silence that enveloped them. And then, the humming stopped. The shadows receded, the air in the room stilled. Sarah sat frozen, her gaze fixed on Emily, her heart a lead weight in her chest. Had it been real, or just a figment of her guilt-ridden imagination? But as she reached for Emily's hand, her fingers brushing against the cold, clammy skin, she knew, with a chilling certainty, that the nightmare wasn't over. It had just begun. Chapter 20. Convergence. Sarah recoiled from Emily's lifeless hand, a strangled sob escaping her lips. The heart monitor, now a flat, insistent drone, confirmed what her heart already knew: Emily was gone. The lavender walls of the room, once a haven of shared dreams and whispered secrets, now seemed to press in on her, suffocating her in a grief so profound it threatened to swallow her whole. She stumbled back from the bed, knocking over a vase of sunflowers, the vibrant blooms scattering across the floor like fallen stars, a cruel mockery of the life that had just been extinguished. The metallic tang that had lingered in the air moments before, the chilling echo of Ben's voice, intensified, twisting into a palpable presence that seemed to coil around her, suffocating her. And then, a sound, a low, guttural moan, emanated from the bed. Sarah froze, her eyes drawn back to Emily's form, a flicker of hope, irrational and desperate, igniting in the ashes of her grief. But it wasn't Emily who moved. Emily's hand, the one Sarah had just released, twitched, the fingers curling into a claw-like grip, a movement so unnatural, so grotesque, it sent a fresh wave of terror crashing over Sarah, washing away any lingering hope of a miracle. Emily's body, still and cold moments before, began to convulse, the movements jerky and uncoordinated, like a marionette controlled by a puppeteer with cruel intentions. The sheets tangled around her limbs, the hospital gown twisting into a grotesque parody of a shroud. And then, Emily's eyes opened, but they weren't Emily's eyes. The soft, hazel gaze that had always held such warmth and understanding was gone, replaced by a malevolent red glow that seemed to burn with an unholy fire. The pupils, dilated and black, were like bottomless pits, reflecting a darkness so profound it threatened to suck Sarah into its abyss. "Emily?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling, the name a desperate plea for recognition, for a shred of the woman she loved to break through the monstrous facade. But the creature on the bed only laughed, a hollow, grating sound that echoed through the room, a mockery of human laughter, a sound that chilled Sarah to the bone and extinguished the last embers of hope. "Emily is gone," Sarah, the creature hissed, its voice a distorted echo of Ben's, twisted and warped, as if filtered through a machine. "But I'm here now, and we have unfinished business." The creature, Emily's body a grotesque vessel for Ben's malevolent spirit, rose from the bed, its movements fluid and predatory, a stark contrast to Emily's usual grace. It stood there, silhouetted against the dying light of the setting sun, a horrifying hybrid of the two people Sarah had loved most in the world, a monstrous fusion of love and loss, of grief and obsession. "You broke me, Sarah," the creature snarled, taking a step towards Sarah, its bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. "You cast me aside, left me to rot in the darkness. But I'm back now, and I'm going to take what's mine." Sarah stumbled back, her mind reeling, her instincts screaming at her to flee. But her feet felt rooted to the spot, paralyzed by a terror so profound it stripped her of all reason, all agency. The creature, its eyes blazing with a malevolent hunger, advanced, its movements predatory, its intentions clear. And as Sarah stared into the abyss of those eyes, she saw a reflection of her own broken heart, a glimpse of the darkness that lurked within her, a reminder of the choices that had led them to this terrifying precipice. Sarah was trapped in a nightmare from which there may be no escape, the line between love and horror blurred beyond recognition. Chapter 21. Reclamation. The creature that wore Emily's face like a stolen mask lunged, its movements a grotesque parody of the grace Sarah knew so intimately. It wasn't Emily's gentle touch that reached for her, but a clawing, grasping hand, fueled by Ben's twisted obsession and a hunger that went beyond the physical. "We were meant to be, Sarah," the creature hissed, Ben's voice, warped and metallic, a violation of Emily's sweetness. "You can't escape me. We're bound together, you and I." Sarah, back pressed against the wall, felt a wave of nausea rise in her throat. This wasn't Ben, not the man she'd loved, not the man she'd breathed. This was a monstrous echo, a digital ghost wearing the skin of her beloved Emily. But in that moment of stark terror, a fierce protectiveness ignited within her. It wasn't for Ben, the man who'd broken her heart and abandoned her to this technological nightmare. It was for Emily, for the memory of her laughter, her warmth, her unwavering love. Emily wouldn't want this, wouldn't want her body used as a tool for Ben's twisted desires. No, Sarah said, the word a gasp escaping her lips. But there was steel in her voice, a spark of defiance that surprised even her. You're wrong. You don't get to claim her. You don't get to claim me. She shoved away from the wall, adrenaline surging through her veins, banishing the paralysis of fear. Her gaze swept the room, frantically searching for a weapon, anything to defend herself against this unholy abomination. Her eyes landed on the shattered vase, the sunflowers scattered across the floor like a pool of spilled sunshine. And in that moment, a memory flashed through her mind. Sunflowers, Emily had said, her voice soft, her fingers tracing the delicate petals of a newly bloomed flower. They always face the sun, even on the cloudiest days. They are a reminder that even in the darkest times, there's always hope. Hope. It was a fragile thing, but it was all she had left. She snatched a shard of broken porcelain from the floor, the jagged edge a testament to the violence that had invaded her sanctuary. It wasn't much, but it was a weapon, a symbol of her refusal to be a victim, a conduit for Ben's twisted desires. Get out of her, Ben, Sarah said, her voice shaking but firm, the shard of porcelain glinting in the dying light of the setting sun. Leave Emily alone. Leave me alone. The creature, its red eyes burning with fury, laughed, the sound a grotesque mockery of human emotion. You think you can stop me, Sarah? You're nothing but a fragile, broken thing. I'll crush you like an insect. It lunged again, its clawing hand reaching for her, the scent of lavender and metal thick in the air. But Sarah was ready. She sidestepped, the shard of porcelain slicing through the air, catching the creature's arm, drawing a line of crimson across the pale skin. The creature roared, a sound of pain and rage that shook the room. It stumbled back, clutching its wounded arm, its red eyes blazing with hatred. You bitch! It screamed, Ben's voice distorted, barely recognizable. You'll pay for that. But Sarah wasn't backing down. She stood her ground, the shard of porcelain held steady, her heart pounding a war drum in her chest. This isn't about you, Ben, she said, her voice clear and strong, the fear replaced by a fierce determination. This is about Emily. This is about taking back what you stole. She charged, the shard of porcelain leading the way, a beacon of light piercing the encroaching darkness. The creature, caught off guard by her ferocity, stumbled back, its movements clumsy, uncoordinated. Sarah struck, the shard of porcelain plunging into the creature's chest, finding the spot where Emily's heart should have been, where Ben's digital essence clung to her stolen form. A blinding light erupted from the wound, filling the room, pushing Sarah back, the force of it knocking her to the floor. She shielded her eyes, the light burning through her eyelids, searing images onto her retinas. And then, silence. The light faded, the humming ceased. The scent of lavender and metal dissipated, replaced by the faint, comforting aroma of Emily's perfume. Sarah lowered her hand, her vision clearing. The creature was gone. Emily's body lay still on the bed, the hospital gown stained crimson, but the twisted contortions, the malevolent glow, had vanished. Her features, though pale and still, were peaceful, a faint echo of the serenity she had radiated in life. Sarah crawled to the bed, her legs weak, her body trembling with exhaustion and the emotional aftershocks of the confrontation. She reached for Emily's hand, her fingers tracing the delicate lines, the familiar warmth replaced by the chill of death. Tears streamed down her face, hot against her cold skin. Grief washed over her, a tidal wave of sorrow that threatened to drown her. But beneath the pain, a flicker of gratitude took root. She had saved Emily from Ben's twisted grasp, had freed her from the digital prison that had held her captive. And in that moment, as she sat beside Emily's lifeless form, Sarah knew that her own journey was far from over. She had faced her demons, had fought for the woman she loved, had emerged from the darkness, battered but unbroken. She was Sarah, and she was finally free. Sarah alone in the quiet room, the setting sun casting long shadows across the wall, a symbol of the darkness she had overcome, the light that awaited her on the horizon. The apartment, no longer a haunted tomb, but a sanctuary filled with memories, a testament to the enduring power of love, loss, and the resilience of the human spirit. The end. Epilogue. Echo in the algorithm. A year had passed since Sarah faced the monstrous manifestation of Ben's digital ghost in Emily's stolen form. A year since she'd plunged a shard of porcelain into the heart of that twisted entity. A year since she watched the light fade from Emily's eyes. The world had moved on, the city's relentless rhythm swallowing the memory of that horrific night. But for Sarah, time seemed to have fractured, splintering into 1,000 shards of grief and guilt. She'd left the city, seeking refuge in a small coastal town where the air was thick with the scent of salt and the only sounds were the cries of gulls and the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. Her apartment, a stark contrast to the cozy haven she'd shared with Emily, was a testament to her self-imposed isolation. The walls were bare, devoid of the vibrant artwork that had once reflected her creative spirit. The only splashes of color came from the overflowing bookshelves, a testament to her desperate search for answers, for solace in the words of others who had faced their own personal hells. She'd thrown herself into her work, the demanding deadlines and intricate designs a welcome distraction from the gnawing emptiness that threatened to consume her. But even in the midst of the most challenging project, a shadow would fall across her mind, a flicker of Emily's smile, the memory of her laughter, a phantom touch that sent shivers down her spine. The nightmares had subsided, but the fear lingered, a constant undercurrent, a prickle of unease that kept her tethered to the past. She'd tried therapy, meditation, yoga, anything to quiet the voices that whispered in the silence of her mind, the echoes of Ben's twisted declarations of love, the chilling sensation of his digital touch. She'd cut herself off from the world, her phone gathering dust on a shelf, her laptop a silent sentinel on her desk. She was afraid to connect, afraid of what might be lurking in the digital ether, afraid of the possibility that Ben, or whatever monstrous entity had consumed him, might find her again. But even in her self-imposed exile, she couldn't escape the feeling that she was being watched. A flicker of movement in the periphery of her vision, a shadow that seemed to linger a moment too long, a faint hum that resonated deep within her bones. These subtle intrusions into her carefully constructed solitude fueled her paranoia, blurring the line between reality and the haunting remnants of her nightmare. One stormy evening, as the wind howled outside her window, mimicking the cries of a wounded beast, Sarah sat at her desk, staring at the blank screen of her laptop. The temptation to connect, to reach out to the world, was overwhelming. She longed to hear Emily's voice, to see her face, even if it was only a digital representation, a ghost in the machine. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the power button, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. And then, the screen flickered to life. It wasn't the familiar welcome screen that greeted her, but a swirling vortex of colors, a kaleidoscope of images that flashed before her eyes too quickly to register. She tried to shut it down, but the keys were unresponsive, the mouse frozen in place. The humming returned, vibrating through the desk, the floor, the very walls of the apartment. It resonated deep within her, a sickeningly familiar sensation that sent a wave of nausea crashing over her. And then, a voice, a whisper, slithered from the depths of the machine, a voice she had thought banished forever. "Hello, Sarah," it said, a chilling echo of Ben's voice, twisted and warped by the digital filter, a ghostly spectre resurrected from the binary code. "Did you really think you could escape me? Did you really believe that our story was over?" The screen went black, but the humming continued, the voice a haunting lullaby that echoed in the silence of the room, a promise that their dance of death was far from over. Sarah sat alone in the darkness, the storm raging outside, a reflection of the turmoil within her, sitting with the unsettling knowledge that the digital ghost of Ben had found her once more. There would be no escape.